Hello, folks. This is Science Talk. I am your host, Jim Massa. I want to discuss with you this very interesting story. It came out about a month or so ago. And it's about, you would never know looking at this. This bird is 46,000 years old. And it was found in the Siberian permafrost. So, what are the particulars of this? This carcass was discovered by two men who were looking for mammoth tusks, as such, and from the village of Alaya Gora in Siberia. So this bird had died 46,000 years ago, and what's unusual is that most, especially small specimens, they're quickly destroyed. Scavengers, decay, microbial action, and the like. Not this specimen. It was protected from decay and scavengers, and was protected in an anaerobic environment, which basically protects it from microbial action. And it was discovered by these two gentlemen in that shape. Looks in pretty good condition, all things considered. And so the bird was in such good shape, it looked like it died just a few days ago, said Love Dalen, a professor of evolutionary genetics at the Center for Paleogenetics in Stockholm, who was with the ivory hunters Boris Berezhnov and Spartak Kabrov when they discovered the bird. It's in pristine condition. Defined as extraordinary because, as I just said, small animals would normally disintegrate rapidly, scavenging activity, microbial activity. It's the only near intact bird carcass documented from the last ice age. So this is literally one of a kind. So when you look at these photos here, okay, that is showing a dorsal aspect, and that's the specimen number identification. And that's the ventral aspect. I mean, you can see the barbs on the feathers. It's just amazing. So it's lined up about 10 centimeters or so, and it's about 25 centimeters. So this is about a 15, 16 centimeter in length specimen, which is roughly about 6 inches in length. So this bird was uncovered in September 2018. Dalen and his colleagues had, they really didn't know its age or species. So what they did was they collected a couple of samples of the feathers and tissue, for radiocarbon dating and DNA sequencing. So he brought it to his lab where postdoctoral researcher Nicholas Dusek, who's the lead author of a new study on this specific bird, analyzed the samples. Radiocarbon dating revealed the bird lived during the same time as other ice age animals, including mammoths, horses, woolly rhinos, bison, and lynx. So the researchers sequenced the mitochondrial DNA to try to identify the species. Mitochondrial DNA is genetic material that is passed down through the maternal line. So generally speaking, the sperm, which is very tiny, is really a packet of nuclear DNA. It finds an ovum, gets inside the cell membrane, swims through the cytoplasm to fuse with the nuclear membrane, introducing the genetic material, which then fuses with the nuclear DNA of the ovum to restore the diploid or diploid chromosome numbers. Each gamete has half the number of chromosomes, called a haploid condition. So in other words, in humans, we have 46 chromosomes that occur in 23 pairs. So you got one set of chromosomes from your mom, one set from your dad. Your mom contributed 23, your dad contributed 23 chromosomes. They combined to form 23 pairs, or 23 times 2, 46. That's pretty much the standard fare for sexually reproducing organisms. So, but what's mitochondrial DNA? Well, Lynn Margulis hypothesized some time ago, and she's basically been shown to be correct, that her hypothesis was that mitochondria and chloroplasts were originally free organisms of their own. But they somehow got incorporated into larger cells, creating what's now called eukaryotic cells, cells that have a defined nuclear region, as well as cytoplasmic organelles. And so if they were free-swimming organisms on their own, they're going to have their own genetic material so that they can replicate themselves, etc. So when the mitochondria and or the chloroplast got incorporated into these other cells, they retained the mitochondria. Now, I just said that the sperm cell is very tiny compared to the ovum, and it's really nothing but a pile of nuclear DNA. When you look at the ovum, during the process of meiosis, which reduces the chromosomes from the diploid to the haploid condition, but there's also two sets of divisions that go on. And the second set of division is when we get the finalization of the haploid number of chromosomes. With the formation of ovum, there is an unequal distribution of the cytoplasmic material such that the resulting ovum is considerably larger than the three other polar bodies which quickly disintegrate. Well, the ovum is comparably large compared to the sperm, so it has a lot of cytoplasmic material, which includes a lot of organelles, including the mitochondria. The large cytoplasmic material is what will help nourish the developing embryo. So that's a very quick, sketch of basically what's going on here as far as chromosome DNA numbers and so on. So that's what's meant by the mitochondrial DNA, is that there's DNA in the mitochondria and it's passed through the maternal line only. Now, this bird's DNA was fragmentary, but they were able to reproduce enough of it so that they can then compare in the database. And so they did a search, and they found that this Ice Age bird was a female horned lark. And the scientific name given is Eremophila alpestris. Now, this discovery sheds light on a transformation of the so-called mammoth steppe. Now, steppe is spelled S-T-E-P-P-E, and that is a type of ecosystem. Basically, a steppe is an unforested grassland. When the bird was alive, the land was a mix of steppe and tundra, with tundra is treeless, frozen ground. So what's the difference between grassland and tundra? Well, the vegetation on tundra is sparse and very, very low to the ground, because the tundra, you have permafrost underneath it. The permafrost precludes plants from establishing deep roots. Grasses need to have a soil that goes down pretty deep, is not frozen right at the surface, so they can put in their root system. Trees even more so, and bushes, etc. So when you look at the depth of the permafrost, of the soil that's required for grassland, bushes, and trees to take hold, it goes deeper and deeper as you go from grassland through trees. So steppe is basically, you're not going to have necessarily permafrost underneath, or if there is permafrost, it's considerably deeper so that the seasonal layer, and I've discussed permafrost before in other video segments, so that the seasonal layer is sufficient that grassland roots can take hold. That's not the case with the tundra. Okay, tundra, you might even find lichen growing on rocks and that kind of stuff. So this bird was alive. The land was a mix of steppe and tundra from 50 to 30,000 years ago. When the last ice age ended about 11,700 years ago, the mammoth steppe transitioned into the three main Eurasian environments that we find today: the northern tundra, the taiga, which is a Russian word, which is a coniferous forest, sometimes called the boreal forest. Okay, and that's found in between the tundra and the steppe to the south. And that's what Dr. Dalen explains. Nowadays, there are close that out. Nowadays, there are two subspecies of horned lark. one living on the tundra in the far north of Eurasia, and the other in the steppe in the south, in Mongolia and neighboring countries. It appears this newly discovered bird is an ancestor of two different subspecies of horned lark. As the environment changed, the horned lark diverged into the two evolutionary lineages we have today. So all in all, the study provides an example of how climate change at the end of the last ice age could have led to the formation of new subspecies. The article is published in the journal Communications Biology. Now, I'm thinking of making a video to explain this, but a very useful tool that evolutionary biologists use are called cladograms. They construct cladograms. Cladograms where you have clades, etc. Cladograms are used to show the evolutionary relationships of species or groups of organisms. So you basically have a timeline, and where we have a split, we see, you see it on the graph. So we might have a timeline going this way, and you see a split coming off. I'll do a video on it so then I can put a diagram up there so it's easier to understand what I'm trying to explain here. But the further back the split is, the more distantly related the two forms are. The more recent the split, the more closely related the two forms are. For example, humans and chimps. Okay? There was a common ancestor that diverged into one line leading to humans, one line leading to chimps, as evidenced by the fact of how close our DNA match. Some 97% if you take into consideration the so-called junk DNA, 99% if you just look at the active, quote-unquote, active DNA, that which gives structure and physiological processes. Because DNA codes for not just how you look, your structure, but also your physiology, the biochemistry that goes on in your body. So cladograms are very useful in constructing evolutionary relationships. If you ever have a chance, if you're in the New York City area, if you ever have a chance, go to the American Museum of Natural History there. The curator is Dr. Mark Norell. They have done superb work. They have redone everything in there. And you plan on spending several days there. They've redone everything, all the displays of all the organisms, specimens, skeletons, what have you. Everything there includes now a cladogram. So you get to see how that organism fits in evolutionarily. Fantastic work that they've done there. I highly recommend it. So what usually leads to speciation? Typically, one cause is geographic isolation. You can also have reproductive isolation as well. But I'm going to focus on geographic isolation because that's basically what happened here with this situation. You had the environment splitting because of climate change, what have you. So you have geographic isolation. The species then become distant enough from each other that they now become separated. Polar bears are a recent divergence off of grizzly bears, by the way. We have growlers and then pizzlies. When a polar bear and a brown bear or a grizzly mate. So I forget which one is. One is going to be. I think the growler is the mother is the polar bear, and the pizzly, the mother is the grizzly bear. I think could be the other way around, but that's the situation. So the speciation, complete speciation, isn't quite complete yet. But how do we know there's still two separate species? Because any resulting offspring is infertile, as is the case with growlers and pizzlies. Same thing with ligers and tyons, or mules. Right? The offspring are infertile, which means infertile offspring are not devoting energy to the gamete production. They tend to grow a little bigger. Anyway, I digress. But this is important news because we have climate change going on now, and we could be causing speciation. Just a thought there. Think about it. Now, this photo here, okay, it's the banks of the Indigirka River in Siberia where the specimen was found. Now, if you look here, okay, you'll see that there's this mist. Okay, that's latent heat energy. Now, this is the specimen was found in September, so I'm supposing that this photograph was taken about the same time. So it's probably not too long after the vernal equinox. You can see the sun here. Obviously, the water's still liquid, so no ice is formed. But remember, water has a much higher heat capacity than does the air. It can hold a lot more energy. It takes longer to heat up. It also takes much longer to cool off. And as it cools off, it slowly gives off its energy. That energy is given off in the form of latent heat energy. That's what this is. So you expect this air right above this water here to be warmer than the air away from the water. And it's going to follow from warm to cool situations. So that's what this is. This is latent heat energy being given off. So I think this is a fascinating study. I wanted to share it with you. It shows, that we have, an example of, we have this ancient species. We now have the evidence that it diverged into two different species of larks today. And this happens all the time in evolution, organisms, and we're probably creating conditions right today that will cause speciation, aside from the extinction that we are causing. Let's not forget that. So, very interesting study, something I wanted to share with you. Thank you for your time. Hello, folks. This is Jim here with Science Talk, asking you to please subscribe to my channel and to inform others of my channel and of the work that I do. Please share to social media platforms that you use. Also, as a reminder, don't forget to click the bell so that you know when I load up more videos. Finally, I ask that you support the work that I do by becoming a patron at patreon.com. Details in the description box below. Thank you for your support.